Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Yasmin Khan from SMEVenture. Today we are presenting the Cybersecurity Summit 2021. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the question box. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time to our agenda, which will start with our keynote global speaker, Mr. Bob Kalka, Vice President in the IBM Security Business Unit, who will be addressing us on Fearless with ZeroTrust, followed by panel discussion on Preserving Customer Privacy with ZeroTrust, where we will have leaders from world of Fintech, Mr. Dipesh Karki, co-founder and CTO of Lenden Club, Mr. Abhinav Sinha, founder of Eco, Mr. Suresh Srinivasan, CTO of SnapBizz, Mr. Sridhar Srinivasan, co-founder and CTO of Nivesh.com, and Dr. Deepak Kalamkar, VP SafeXpay, along with Mr. Tushar Haralkar, Security Software Technical Sales Leader and ZeroTrust Champion, IBM Technology Sales, India, South Asia. And last but not the least, session on evolving cybersecurity models dealing with today's biggest challenges by our guest speaker, Mr. Archie Jackson, Senior Director, Head of IT and Security, Incedo. Now I would like to pass the baton to our moderator, Mr. Daya Prakash, who will take control of our summit. Thank you.
Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Daya Prakash and I am the founder of Talent on Lease and consulting editor at SMEVenture. Today we are presenting the Cybersecurity Summit 21. Let us begin with the keynote address, for which we have Mr. Bob Kalka, Vice President Global Technical Sales in IBM Security Business Unit. He has held a number of leadership positions in the product management, sales, business development, marketing management, and product development. He is a frequent international speaker on the relationship of business with information technology, cloud computing, and security, and has had numerous papers and articles published on these topics. He also holds a United States patent related to secure distributed computing software. Welcome to Cybersecurity Summit 21, Mr. Bob Kalka. Great to have you. We all are excited to hear your thoughts on going fearless with ZeroTrust.
Namaste. Thank you for the kind introduction. You know, in the 27 of my 32 years that I've spent at IBM helping to build our cybersecurity business, I've seen a lot of trends come and go. I've seen a lot of movements come and go. And the one that has really struck out as most dramatic to me is what's going on with ZeroTrust right now. So what I wanted to share with you in this keynote is a very pragmatic view of ZeroTrust based on hundreds and hundreds of engagements with clients that we've seen. Because clearly this has been an incredibly hot topic. What we've seen is a very pragmatic view of what is the art of the possible with this as well. Now look, ZeroTrust has been around for over a decade, as everybody knows. But what has made it so dramatic is a fundamental shift in the definition of the perimeter that needs to be secured. Right? So for 20 years, we talked about the network being the perimeter that needs to be secured. But of course, now, as soon as you start going towards a hybrid cloud environment, the perimeter changes from the network to anywhere and everywhere your sensitive data is. So think about what a shift that is. Instead of just worrying about protecting the outer perimeter, we now have to be aware of anywhere and everywhere our sensitive data is stored anywhere. And we have to find that data and literally form micro perimeters around it and be able to effectively secure it. So that is what's been so dramatic, is that with that change in the perimeter as you move to hybrid cloud, it not only forces us to look at the perimeter differently, but it also exposes one of the elephants in the room, which is the fact that most organizations had struggled to keep aware and track of where all their sensitive data is in the first place. So if we've struggled with it at the outset, and then we're putting that data in more places, right, it generally causes a big problem. And so that is the reason that we've seen Zero Trust really take off as a dramatic movement in how we address cybersecurity. And India is certainly not immune to these effects. I mean, look at these numbers. I mean, almost a third of Indian consumers have been a recent victim, for example, or know someone who has. So the problem is prevalent in every country, including India. And then when we look at this even more, the bigger problem is not only are we seeing problems and breaches, but it is taking on average almost a year to even identify and contain the breaches that we're seeing. That's the biggest problem, right? It's not only that we're being breached, but it takes us almost a year to figure out that that's even happening. And with the increased regulation that we're seeing around the world, and especially in India, right, there's so many penalties that are possible here for non-compliance, such as with the Personal Data Protection Bill, that it's financial. It's not just operations and availability, et cetera, of the systems. And so when we look at India, we see that the biggest concerns when it comes to transactions is almost 3/4 of you are more concerned about scams and fraud because of COVID. And indeed, COVID has brought out the worst in the worst, right? We've seen them get very creative in taking advantage of the issues around the world to go even further, right? So what I would like to share with you is, so what do we do about this? And what's a pragmatic way, once again, based on what we're seeing other people do? So there's a lot of different models of how to encompass what Zero Trust is all about, from Forrester, Google, Gartner, and others. And of course, there's a NIST, very nice NIST definition of what Zero Trust is. But what I've put in yellow here is essentially the 4 core components of Zero Trust. Never trust, never trust, always verify, implement least privilege, eliminate perimeter-based controls, because we need to worry about this new perimeter, right, which is anywhere and everywhere the sensitive data is, and then assume you've been breached. And when you take those 4 principles and implement them, it fundamentally changes how we look at cyber. So what we've noticed is that when we are working with clients in Zero Trust projects is that you see a number of consistent use cases. So for example, how do we preserve customer privacy, right? So this gets into all sorts of topics, such as user preferences, consent, user access, privacy regulations, etc. A second very common case we see is when you go to hybrid cloud, how do we make sure we're protecting all your access to everything? So that's a second use case. A third use case is securing the remote workforce. And of course, COVID has, heightened this one for obvious reasons, because we have so many people working remotely. I'll come back to that in a moment. And then also reducing the risk of insider threat. As I assume all of us know, right? The most common reason that we have a breach is to have some kind of malware coming from some kind of phishing attack, compromising an insider account, and then being able to do things, right? So these are the 4 most common use cases that we're seeing. And there's a 5th one that has emerged as probably the biggest one, and that's ransomware itself, right? So there's common themes in how we see people wanting to address Zero Trust around these things. And every one of these is pretty dramatic. Now, remember what I said, securing the remote workforce. Look at this. So what's very, very interesting is that we just put out a brand new cost of data breach report, which is available at no cost. And what we found is very interesting is that you notice that the average number of days to identify and contain a breach, if you have less than 50% of your employees doing remote work, is about 280 days. But if more than 50% are remote, then it's 354 days. So it's a couple of months longer, right? So think about that relative to what I shared with you with the India data. It's right there. India is right in the middle of that. And so as we go more remote and as COVID has had this effect for us, it in fact is making it harder to discover this stuff. So what I wanted to show you, once again, is a very pragmatic view of how to address Zero Trust around those use cases that I just shared to overcome these kind of challenges that we're seeing. So one of the things that we've noticed with Zero Trust is that there's a lot of different definitions people will have of it. Once again, what I'm going to share you is a very pragmatic view based on what we're seeing people actually doing. So the very simple way to describe zero trust is in the following. You want to make sure that only the right users are getting only the right access to only the right data for only the right reason. When you boil down all the different things in zero trust, this is a very, very simple way of articulating what it really is. Now, what we've seen from, once again, working with many, many clients on this is that if you look at all the possible risk management controls that you could implement to implement that idea, is that there are roughly a dozen of them that pop to the top that we see getting the most attention. So I'm just going to share those with you very briefly so you can get a sense of what others are doing. So for making sure that only the right users can get in, we generally see three controls really dominant right now. First of all is identity governance, which is, do you know who has access to what? Second is identity analytics. Can you look at who has access to what and determine pockets of users and access that look a little suspicious? Like, let's say you have a group of people that aren't privileged users but have access to almost everything, right? Why is that? We should probably look at that. And then the third one, which is amazing that it's still such a big issue because it's been known to be an issue for almost 20 years, is privileged account management, right? And this is the insider accounts. And yet a lot of organizations still struggle with effectively managing privileged accounts. So those are the three controls that really stick out for that piece. For right access, clearly access management. Once we know who's out there, can we effectively control their access? And then probably the hottest control on here these days is adaptive authentication. Why is that? Because when we're in a hybrid cloud environment, we want to keep very close track to how individuals are interacting with us. So let's say that I generally authenticate to a certain application at the same general time frame every day from the same location. And now tomorrow I'm on off hours, say in the middle of the night my time, and I'm from a different device, and it's a mobile device that's been jailbroken, right? In that case, adaptive authentication would say, I probably need to step up the authentication here and require a second or even third form of authentication, right? So adaptive authentication is white hot on these zero trust projects. Now let's go to right data, because we want to make sure that only the right users have only the right access to only the right data. There are four controls that we see getting the most attention here. First of all, of course, is encryption. If I've encrypted the data when it goes out to, say, a cloud service and it's sensitive data, then it's encrypted and it gets compromised, then of course, no one can do anything with it. Second is discovery and classification. Like I said, the elephant in the room around zero trust is that most organizations have struggled to effectively manage sensitive data to begin with. So now once we have it going all over the place and potentially multiple hybrid clouds, we really need to know where it is so we can in fact put these controls around them and form the micro perimeters and protect them. So discovery and classification is a huge topic. Third is what we often hear the analysts call data and file activity monitoring. And that's, can you monitor who's looking at the sensitive data? Can you lock it down? Right, so that's a huge one here. And then finally, one of my favorites, because I think I had several years traveling where this control never came up. And on zero trust projects, this control always comes up, and that's key management. Because of course, not only do you have to effectively manage your encryption keys, but there's a lot of advanced mechanisms that some of the public cloud providers are coming out with that you can take advantage of to make things even more secure. Like, for example, my brethren in the IBM cloud team have not only done, bring your own key, but keep your own key, where you literally are bringing and managing your keys on behalf of the public cloud provider, IBM Cloud in this case. So key management is a huge topic. And then right reason, this one is very intriguing. First of all, it's a category that we haven't even seen the analysts provide a term for yet, but we call it data risk insights. So everybody would like to look at sensitive data access and sensitive data usage over long periods of time. But storing data usage data locally takes up a lot of space. And so most organizations only keep a couple of weeks of data around to analyze. And you and I both know that if you're looking at more data over longer periods of time, you're going to detect more potential fraudulent activity. So what Data Risk Insights is about going to a cloud-based architecture for this, where you can examine large swaths of data over very long periods of time and apply your algorithms against it to find potentially fraudulent activity. And that's what that one is. Second is fraud detection. That's transactionally. Can I tell in a transaction in real time if something looks amiss? And then finally, once again, this is an amazing one to have to even talk about. But you know, one of the top reasons for breaches is misconfigured, under-configured, or poorly configured devices. And so being able to make sure that we have proper configuration and management, not only of our devices, but also for the cloud native development that our DevOps teams are doing, et cetera, is if you look at that multi-layer cake with Docker containers, right, and Kubernetes and, you know, things like Red Hat OpenShift, which is enterprise-grade Kubernetes, is making sure that all that is configured correctly. So we've got the traditional environment and the cloud native environment, and configuration management is a huge topic. So those are the 12 controls that we've seen. There's obviously more controls that people are doing for Zero Trust, but these are the ones that are popping to the top that we're seeing in almost every single engagement. Now, what's interesting about Zero Trust is that as you're implementing those controls that are predominantly around applications and data and devices, et cetera, is that it goes hand in hand with what organizations are doing to modernize themselves, right, as we're getting towards hybrid cloud. And one of the big impacts we see of Zero Trust is that it's always done in conjunction with heightening the maturity of our threat management models in an organization. So if I were to summarize for you what the typical organization looks like of how they do threat management within their SOC, a simple way to talk about it is you got to find the needles in the haystack. You need to confirm whether each needle is sharp enough to take action on, right? Because something suspicious doesn't necessarily need attention if it doesn't generate any risk for our organization. We may just need to pay attention to it. You may not have to fix something, but in cases where it does have an impact where we've got to fix something, then you got to fix what you find, right? So we have a concept at IBM in our cyber ranges that we like to call left and right of boom, where boom's a cyber event, left of boom is what do you do to discover you're being attacked, and then right of boom is what do you do to recover from it. I shared some statistics with you earlier that it takes almost a year typically to even find that you're being attacked with that data I showed you. Right? That's kind of the left of boom piece. Then when you discover it, how do you actually recover from it? So the way organizations work around this is very, very interesting, is that what everybody starts to, let's start with the find piece here, the find bubble. How do you find that you're being attacked? Because that's obviously something very important around Zero Trust, is what everybody does is starts by collecting, normalizing, correlating, reporting, and monitoring and logs. That's what, you know, we all know as SIM, Security Information and Event Management. And what's troubling is a lot of organizations stop there. They say, I ask, what's your security analytics program? And they'll say, oh, we have a SIM. And I go, well, that's good. That's kind of baseline. But, you know, how do you detect, for example, that maybe if you have, you know, subcontractors, whatever, contractors in your systems, and let's say you monitor them and they're downloading on average 3 confidential documents a week, and let's say you have a contractor downloading 300 confidential documents. You probably want to look at that person. With logs, you may never find that, and if you do, it's down the road. So where most people go is they graduate up to real-time network flow analysis, and then they go into user behavior analytics and even core forensics so we can get to root cause analysis, right? So organizations typically, when they're implementing a Zero Trust project, will also look at maturing how they're doing security analytics and detecting so we can improve on that 280 to 354-day detection trend that I showed you earlier in my comments. So that's the first piece, is we need to get more mature in how we're discovering an attack in the first place. Then once we discover things that look off a little bit, how do you confirm? So this is amazing. The most common practice we see in organizations around the world, that once you see a potential indicator of compromise, how do you verify that in fact it is a problem I need to fix? The most common thing is this incredible thing called Google search. We've watched level 1 SOC analysts come up with these wonderfully ornate things saying, hey, we saw a change to a device configuration and some strange network behavior related to that device afterwards. Has anyone else seen this? This is amazing. This is a global phenomenon. It's the most common practice. I didn't say best practice, but the most common practice SOCs use is both searching the web as well as asking their blog friends, right? Remember, typically level 1 SOC analysts are members of blogs, 5 to 13 of them we saw, and we'll ask their blog buddies. Now, the big problem with this, of course, is that roughly only 20% of the world's threat intelligence is indexed and searchable. So the most common practice is to manually search through 20% of the data. So there's much better ways to do that. So what we see, organizations will look at investigative analysis, where you make your cyber data pool, whether it's physical, which some do, or virtual, which is far more pragmatic. It has kind of a data fabric approach to cyber data, is you make that data more colorful by bringing in unstructured data, such as phone call logs, video feeds even, and things like that, social media sentiment. But the ultimate here is artificial intelligence, right? So at IBM, for example, we're now 5 years into training our Watson AI engine to ingest and digest and apply threat intelligence. So instead of having to go manually search the web, you can just ask Watson. And in a well-tuned environment, and many times in seconds, you can get an answer that 96% odds, here's what your problem is, here's the 17 sources we used to come to that conclusion, click here and read them if you want, right? So this is an area where AI can have massive impact on cybersecurity. And then finally, we get to the piece of fixing when you actually do find a problem. And the latest study I saw is that 73% of organizations still don't have well-defined, up-to-date incident response run books or playbooks for the major cyber events they're worried about. So I was a math minor in college. I was a computer science major. So I write like math symbols, so a null set. Most organizations make it up as they go, what their playbooks are, which is not good. So the first thing we need to do is raise the awareness of the organization, and then ultimately not only define our playbooks for responding to an attack, which most people today call SOAR, right? Security orchestration and automated response. But getting there, not only defining it, but automating that stuff, okay? So what I'm going to close with on you, because when we look at zero trust, right? So not only is it a phenomenon because of the change in perimeter, and because of the fact that there's a lot of statistics that show that we need to improve, and the fact that this movement towards hybrid cloud is exposing some of the elephants in the room, such as poor management of sensitive data that pre-existed the move to cloud, is that we not only see these pragmatic controls being applied and improvements to the maturity of threat management, but the final point I want to make to you that zero trust is having a huge impact on is the fact that most of the CISOs that we work with are all worried about how do we support effectively the modernization of the organization around us. And what's amazing to me is oftentimes the conclusion, the initial conclusion that a CISO will make is that the way to support the modernization of the organization around me is to just try harder on what I've done for the last 20 years, which is continue to buy off-the-shelf products, dozens of vendors, and try to stitch them together more. Hybrid cloud has proven that that model does not work at the speed of cloud, if I can use that term. So what we've learned is the way that you support the modernization of the organization around you is by modernizing how you deliver cyber services, right, to your organizations. And so we started looking at that several years ago and realized that as the move to hybrid cloud happens, which makes zero trust such a prominent thing, we were missing a step in how we look at cybersecurity, and that step is what we call federation in terms of federated search, investigation, and applying threat intelligence. What does that mean? The model all of us have operated under for 20 years is not only stitching together individual products, but also then you put in some kind of, cyber tool and you pull all the data into it, and you don't do analytics until all that data is into a single tool. Well, that does not scale in hybrid cloud. What we've learned is the far more pragmatic approach is a federated approach where you get an indicator of compromise somewhere, and then all you do is you look in the various sources. Like, let's say, into your SIM tool, right? Whether it's our QRadar tool or, one of the other ones that's out there. Going into the data security tools like our Guardian tool or some of the others. Going into AWS, Google Cloud, right? Azure, IBM Cloud, and looking in there to see indicators of compromise. Have you seen anything like this? Using this approach where you don't have to move all the data to one place before you can do security analytics, but actually do it in a federated way, has a dramatic impact. And so we started looking at that 3 years ago and actually have built a cloud native approach to this. So the modernized way to do cybersecurity, to support the modernization of the organization around you, is literally through cloud native microservices. So we are amongst the leaders in generating that. We have something called our Cloudtech for Security, which is in fact a Kubernetes-based, Red Hat OpenShift-based microservices framework for not only doing this federated search investigation and applying threat intelligence, as well as fixing what you find, but what you'll see over time, and we believe a lot of other vendors are going to follow us on this, is that you're going to see that all of these capabilities will also be available as microservices on this cloud native platform, so the entire organization can leverage them faster. So the net is we have to modernize how we deliver cyber in a way that supports the modernization of the organization around us, and do it in a way that applies the zero trust model. So that is what I wanted to share with you today. I'm very excited to be part of this. Needless to say, at IBM, we have a huge investment here. We'd love to work with all of you, and we'd love to work with all of our partners as well out there as we do these things. Now, the final thing I'll share with you is that we have so much experience with zero trust projects. We have a number of things, including a no-cost zero trust framing and discovery workshop. And so for anyone attending this conference, we do invite you to be nominated for one of these free workshops, and we do some incredible design thinking, which allows you to tie where you are with the best practices that are out there around zero trust. So once again, thank you for all of your time, and I wish you an incredible rest of your conference.
Thank you, Mr. Bob Kalka, for sharing such amazing insights on how Indian organizations can go fearless with zero trust. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move on to our next segment. We have a panel discussion on preserving customer privacy with zero trust with leaders from the world of fintech. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's panel discussion. The topic of today's panel discussion is preserving customer privacy with zero trust. This is your host, Daya Prakash. I would be moderating the session. I'm so excited to have a great mix of speakers today. I have with me Mr. Abhinav Sinha, co-founder Echo, Mr. Suresh Srinivasan, Chief Technology Officer SnapBizz, Mr. Srinivasan, co-founder and CTO Nivesh.com, Dr. Deepak Kalambkar, VP InfoSec SafeXpay, Mr. Sandesh Govalkar, Vice President Technology Angel Broking, should be joining us soon, and Mr. Tushar Haralkar, Digital Trust Leader, IBM Security. I welcome you all to today's session, and I really look forward to a very engaging session today. As you know, preserving customer privacy with zero trust is the topic of today's discussion. Just one or 2 points from my side that I wanted to mention here was that today, if you see 80% of breached organization stated that their customers' personal data or PII was compromised during the data breach. Right? In addition, regulations like Personal Data Protection Bill could result in heavy penalties, even up to INR 15 crore for non-compliance with personal data requirements. A zero trust approach can help organization protect customer privacy with access control that are based on least privilege, giving access to only those with legitimate need and for the agreed upon purpose. To further deliberate on this topic or the relevance of this topic, I would like to call upon our expert, Mr. Tushar Haralkar, who has over 20 years of experience in cybersecurity. Tushar is leading IBM Security software portfolio for India and Southeast Asia. And Tushar is a zero trust champion, helps clients to put zero trust into action. So, over to you, Mr. Tushar.
Hey, thanks, Daya. I hope everyone is safe and healthy. It's my pleasure to be in front of such a distinguished panel of eminent cybersecurity leaders. I'm really looking forward to this discussion around zero trust, as this topic is very relevant in today's context and something very close to my heart. So, as Daya has set the context for this discussion, where we keep on hearing the data breaches, daily around the recent data breach that we heard around Domino's, Air India, and so many organizations. One of the reasons what we see for data breaches is ransomware attacks. It could be malware, it could be phishing, right, and so on and so forth. But the other challenges that we see, especially in this times, is that as organizations are moving towards cloud, they are worried about how do they protect that hybrid cloud journey, how do they protect the identity, how do they protect the data, how do they protect the applications, and then the other aspect which also the organization is worried about, how do I secure my remote workforce, because as part of pandemic most of us are working remotely, so they're worried how do I secure my remote workers, and then from a overall research perspective. So as part of our India, as part of our IBM India Ponemon Institute, the research says that 60% of the attacks are as part of the insider threats. Last but not the least, where we are going to focus today is the data privacy, right? And if you see, data privacy is a concern not only from an organization perspective, but also from a consumer perspective. So I, as an employee, or I, as a customer, will be concerned about how my data is, secured. How, is my privacy maintained? Right. So as a customer, I will always have that concern. And from an organization perspective, also, they will have concern about how do I preserve my customer privacy, my employee privacy, so on and so forth. And regulations are there, right? So there is India Privacy Law, which is going to get launched soon, which will be on the similar lines of GDPR, which states that there is a huge penalty, which is 15 crores for non-compliance of personal data. So that's the context. That's the context in terms of why organizations are adopting zero trust as an overall strategy. We all know zero trust is not a tool, it's not a product, it's a strategy, and it's an approach. And zero trust has always been there for over a decade. But the reason it has become so relevant in the current context is because now we no more access our applications, our data to the corporate firewalls, right? There is no perimeter now. The second is there are no users who only come from corporate devices. There are employees, there are contractors coming from their own devices. The data no more resides within the network. It's spread across the hybrid cloud. And authentication is no more just limited to username, password, or OTP, right? Because username, password, and OTP is also getting compromised. So we are moving from an era of trust but verify to never trust, always verify, and that's where the zero trust is all about, right? So with that note, I would like to open this forum for discussion, where while we heard about all of these challenges, today we are going to focus more on the data privacy challenge aspect of it, and would like to hear your expert views, your experiences around how would you take care of those data privacy challenges. So with that, thank you so much, and over to the panelists.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tushar, for that introduction to the topic today. But before I really get down to the topic and data security privacy issue, one thing I've realized that of late, and I'm sure everyone will agree with me, is that the pace of digital transformation has really got accelerated at a speed that we never anticipated, right, in our lifetimes. So with that, it's a lot of data that is getting generated today and coming to the organization. So on that, I would like to start this discussion today by asking my first question to Mr. Abhinav, that on the digital transformation side, uh, you know the byproduct of digital transformation is data, in some sense, right? What are the key concerns you have around data governance? If you can share your thoughts, Mr. Abhinav.
So thanks a lot, Daya. Thanks a lot, Tushar, for the opening remarks. I'm happy to kind of share my view. And unlike most of your panelists, I'm not a technology expert. So I'm going to give my experience as a business person of how we kind of deal with data protection, data security. And there you're spot on. COVID. I have heard this being spoken about in multiple forums that COVID was the new CTO. It really got companies to transform and get into digital transformation, and we are no different. Let me just give you an example. We are a company which enables small businesses scale their business. So we kind of enable small businesses to kind of start their business or scale their business, and we give them access to first time credit. And some of these businesses that we work with could be an individual or could be a retail outlet. Now, typically, I've been running Echo for the last 14 years. That for every retail outlet or every business that we signed up in the last 14 years, we used to do this face to face in person. We used to prospect the customer, and we used to tell them about the platform, train them, and get them to latch on to Echo and get the benefits of working on Echo. But over the last 16 months, this is completely digital. This is, I didn't feel very comfortable to be sitting in the comforts of my house while telling my sales colleague to go out and, prospect customers in person. So we've taken an approach which is completely work from home. And as a result of which, we had to kind of really abandon a lot of processes which kind of involved in-person interaction with customer, and we had to go completely digital. And to that extent, you're absolutely right. The amount of data that we were generating before to the amount of data that we are generating today is probably 10x. Because many processes which were which were imagined or envisioned to be in person today have gone digital, and as soon as they go digital, there's like loads of data that gets generated. Now, so that's my personal experience of the amount of stuff that is going digital right now in the last 12 to 14 months, and I'm sure other panelists would have had similar experiences through the last 12, 14 months. On the concerns, what I have realized is that data architecture and flow of data within the organization probably has become even more important than the platform or the product architecture. And one has to, because like somebody said, data is oil. But if data is not kept probably properly, it is actually of no use, right? If you can't make use of data, or if data is scattered all over the place, it really makes no sense, right? It is just consuming a lot of space on your cloud and really not giving you value for it. So what we have learned is that data architectures, data flows have to be really solid. There is data getting generated on CRM, there is data on your data lake, there is data on your application servers. Every process which is getting converted digitally is generating even more data on. So there is transaction, so there is customer transaction data, there is customer engagement data. It's just loads of it. And unless and until we kind of crack this as a company, it's a challenge for us to make sure that the data architecture, the data flows are absolutely solid. And so, a lot of things come out, unsecured data is a problem, stale data is a problem, disconnected data is a problem. So so I would one of the biggest. So there are lots of problems, but I would if I had to summarize it, I think if the organizations of today do not get their data architecture right, I think there's a lot of one, they will not be able to squeeze out the value out of the data, and thereafter I think there is a lot of problem with data and its security. So not specifically getting into very minute data issue, but at 30,000 level, I would say getting the data architecture right, I think has become even more paramount than getting the product architecture or the platform architecture right. I think it's as important, even more.
Sure.
That's been my
Thank you so much.
in the last 10 years.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Abhinav. Mr. Suresh, what are your views on around the whole digital transformation and anything that you would like to add here?
Yeah, I think Abhinav covered a very good spectrum, and between Tushar and Abhinav, great views. So quickly, I think SnapBizz is one of the largest digitization platform for retailers, small kirana shops. We are very focused about kirana shops, and our target base is typically first time user of internet for sure. Many of these do not have a sense of security of the data, or they don't even know what data they're carrying, to be honest, right? So the trust that we run is a trust that we promise to the shops that your data is secure with us, right? And it's going to the cloud. It is secure from every aspect, right? And that's a trust which is I would say infinite times zero, because a kirana store, all his livelihood or this asset that he has built is his shoppers and his customers, right? And if we lose that to a large data breach, that's a very big shattered trust, right? So for us, from day zero of the design and architecture, we were very sensitive about data pipelines, the architecture, because we are an ecosystem solution. There are too many touch points in the whole, because we're connecting a kirana store, we're dealing with the customers or the shoppers at one end, the brands or the supply side of the kirana store on the other end, and now we are also dealing with the leading partners of some of the largest banks and fintechs, where they're also using this data for lending opportunities for these kirana stores. Every leg of this is super sensitive, and there are multiple touch points, right? There is edge hardening, there is the transmission layer hardening, then there is cloud hardening, right? So every touch point has always been designed with utter security. So our concerns are always that any point there could be a breach, and I think Tushar, whatever he spoke was precisely the things we have always worked on, controlling privilege levels or managing the right audits, because we don't want an unnecessary information to go to a wrong person at any point of time, and every hole has to be fixed at that point.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mr. Suresh. So I think we spoke about digital transformation and the way it is resulting into generating lots of data for the organization. Mr. Abhinav, you mentioned it. Mr. Suresh, you mentioned it, right? Now, I think my next obvious question is that the way the amount of data generation is increasing, the digital transformation is increasing, the threat to the personal data is also increasing at the similar pace or maybe much faster than that, right? So if I may come to you Mr. Sridhar, and ask you as to if that's the ground reality, how effectively you are able to deal with it, or what's your take on that?
So good afternoon, everyone. And I think we've had some very excellent points by Abhinav, Tushar, and Suresh. See, at Nivesh, we basically work with individual distributors, right? And they are basically distributors located either in the major cities or in the smaller towns, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 towns, right? And they are financial distributors who basically work with their customers in terms of getting them onboarded on various financial products or various financial journeys, right? And so our focus is essentially around enabling the digital transformation for these distributors, right? So just like Suresh is doing something similar for kirana stores, we are doing a similar kind of enablement for those distributors, right? And so if you look at it, we are basically giving them a full array of products, a full array of technology options in terms of how best to automate, bring productivity into their own workflows and things like that. And so as part of that, a lot of data flows happen, right? And our distributors, who are our partners, they work with their clients, so their clients' data is on the platform, the distributors' data is on our platform, right? All the manufacturers, they are on the platform. The transaction happens here, right? All the record keeping happens on our platform, right? And so there's a lot of data that's actually on the platform today. And we've been digital first right from the word go. From 2017 we launched, and we've been digital first always, even in terms of partner acquisition, right? And so we've been running a lot of things digitally, which is why when COVID happened, it was like boost for our business already, right? Because a lot of the players realized that it is not going to work unless you go online, right? And so they all started looking for platforms, and then they came towards Nivesh. And so we saw pretty good adoption of our platform post COVID, right? But as I say, I mean, this is where all the data starts coming into the platform, and then we start worrying about what to do with it, right? So as Suresh said, data architecture is extremely important, and that's where we have also been. And since we started digital first, that is something that has been at our core, right? And so we look at it in terms of how do we what is the nature of the data that is coming into our system, which of those are critical, which of those are less critical, and so on, and kind of define segments around it, right? And then figure out what kind of authentication mechanisms we want to build to access each of these data points or data sets, right? These things are all important for us. Data access controls are built into every application that we build, right? Every nature of sensitive data is encrypted, whether it is at rest or at motion. We have audit log of key access changes. All these things collectively go towards making the data more robust. And to the earlier point, I think one important thing, at least from our perspective, because our partners are also very finicky about the data, right? I mean, unlike the Kirana stores who may not understand the significance, the distributors who work with us, they are pretty savvy from that point of view. That this is their customer, they don't want it to go anywhere else, or they don't want it to be leaked, right? So they do understand the nature of that, and so our one of the key things that we also try and do is communicate, right? Communicate what we are doing, how we are doing it, how the data is protected, right? That forms one very core part of what we do. Besides all the technology initiatives and all the data initiatives and all of it, there is this education also that's constantly going on, right? To make sure that they understand where we are and how the data is protected and how do we kind of sensitize them further, both for them and for their clients.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Sridhar. Thank you so much. Let me come to Mr. Tushar. You heard Mr. Abhinav, Mr. Suresh, Mr. Sridhar speak about. I think there are two things coming out clearly. One is that with the amount of data being generated and the kind of attacks that are taking place today, how do I keep my data and protect my data? Like, these are the two kind of challenges that I at least I heard from this discussion so far. What has been your take? You've been interacting with the leaders in the industry, across geography. So, what has been your take? Is the situation similar, or are we in a different situation here? What's your take?
Yeah, so some great views by panelists. I think the digital transformation has really changed the way the business operates. And I think because now we have different users to manage, like employees, customers, partners, and they come from any device, right? They can come from any device. That's the first thing. The second is the applications and data is spread across your environment. Applications, data, your servers, it's spread across your heterogeneous environment. So data basically is lying everywhere. So the approach that we see our customers taking is, as Abhinav mentioned at the start, is data architecture is very important, and I do agree to that. So as part of our overall data protection strategy, the first thing that we see our customers doing is, because the data is lying everywhere, where are my crown jewels lying, right? Where is my sensitive data lying? First they discover that. Once they discover that, let's say out of 100 systems or 100 databases, maybe 50 databases have your crown jewels. So you start monitoring that data. So anybody who tries to update or delete or do any actions which could be suspicious, you may want to really block that and basically get visibility in terms of what's happening with your data. So having visibility is the topmost priority when it comes to the data protection strategy. Once you have the visibility around your crown jewel, then you basically lay down your policies as per your information security guidelines in terms of what action do you want to take basis on the risk of that data. So that's the first aspect of it. The second aspect of it, which Sridhar mentioned, is about encrypting the data. So because one aspect is you are getting visibility through monitoring. The second aspect is, despite monitoring, if your data is taken out, if your data is exfiltrated, the fraudster should really not get anything out of the data, because if he's stealing the data in clear text, it's a huge loss for the organization, right? So encryption plays a very important role. So you have to encrypt the data at rest and in motion. So encryption plays a very important role when it comes to the data protection, right? And the third aspect is obviously from a compliance and regulation perspective, right? We need to comply to those different data privacy regulations, because non-compliance of data results in heavy fines, right? But that's just one aspect of it, right? Compliance is just one aspect of it. Now we are seeing organizations over and above compliance are looking to improve their overall security and risk posture, right? And to do that, these are the three elements that organizations are looking at protecting their data.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Tushar. I would like to come to you, Dr. Deepak, at this point of time. And, I'm sure you must be aware that this, personal data protection bill is, around the corner. Same question I would like to come to you, Mr. Dipesh, after I have taken the views from Dr. Deepak. What as an organization, what is the preparation that you already have done with regards to that, or in general corresponding to that?
Yeah, going for a question about the data protection bill. We are already in the process of implementation some encryption tools to protect the data, and also last month only we cleared the RBI data localization certification. So now we have the certificate that we are protecting the data and we are keeping.
We are not able to hear you, Dr. Deepak. There is some issue. I think you need to come close to computer, but we are not able to hear you, Dr. Deepak. No. Mr. Dipesh, if I may come to you and know from you, Dr. Deepak, let's come back to you. So, Mr. Dipesh.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Daya, for giving me this opportunity to speak here. And hello to all the panelists. I joined a little late. Coming back to your question regarding preparation for data privacy. So at LinkedIn Club, see, we started quite late, I guess. So when we started, the hype of being all cloud was quite popular back then. But then, fortunately, even localized was another thing that was trending at that time. So we, right from our inception, always focused on keeping our information in cloud, but all the KYC related, all the important information pertaining to customers inside the country. So that was our first initiative back then. Post that, there was certain requirement from the RBI itself in order to, do periodic checks on the system in order to comply with the NBFC guidelines of data protection. So we were periodically doing our assessment through, VAPT and through a standard CISA certified auditors in order to ensure that we are complying with all the policies in and around, mentioned by the RBI and the government. On top of that, we also felt that there are a lot of checks that are required in order to ensure that customers' data are properly protected in the system. For which, of course, like earlier panelists mentioned, we are also strictly following a lot of encryption algorithms in various places, especially when it comes to keeping important pointers towards the customer and not storing the information that are not required to be stored but only required to be verified. On top of that, something that we learned from the GDPR compliance policies that we should not be going too much in detail when it comes to personal data of customers. So that is something though comes as a hiccups, but then we're carefully playing on that area, right, with ensuring that we only work with the data that are required in order to do our assessment and keeping the customers updated about what are the type of access that we are having when it comes to interacting with the customers through our applications. And apart from that, I believe educating our internal teams when it comes to handling the data is another important part that we're working with, right? So, see, there will be role-based access control to various department heads based on their knowledge, based on their requirement when it comes to making systems, informed decisions in the system. But with that being said, completely restricting people into with access to certain data would not be feasible because say that will hinder growth when it comes to startup. So we have to be careful on what we are sharing, how we are sharing, how we are educating them, right? And especially right now during this COVID times where most of us are working remotely, right? Restricting too much of information can be counterproductive. So that's the reason we're quite careful when it comes to validating the users who are accessing these data, and we are ensuring that their roles have necessary accesses. On top of that, we have also focused on keeping our entire operating systems in cloud through desktop as a service kind of architecture, through which we are ensuring that whatever data exchange is happening, it is happening through a secure network completely. So these are some of the key important points that we're working towards.
Sure.
On top of that, there are a lot of other minor compliance related areas that we are working upon.
Sure. No, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Dipesh. I have one open question, and please feel free to raise your hand. But data privacy regulations require clear and transparent user consent, management. Just wanted to know, whoever is okay to answer this. But how do you effectively obtain and track consumer consent? Like, any one of you doing this already, or?
We are doing it at LinkedIn Club for sure, right? So just for example, when it comes to even accessing the camera, we have to tell them why we are asking that access, right? And when it comes to going to the next page, and if I say that I need access to the document folder, I have to tell them about the particular use cases. And just like they do in iOS, right? Whether you want to give limited access to one particular file or you want an access to the entire gallery for perpetually. So that type of access also needs to be specified to the user. When it comes to locations, you have to tell them when you are accessing it. So yeah.
Sure. So you're obtaining that.
The stepwise education is important.
Yeah, I think beyond also, we take consents practically from the retailer and consumer, whoever is transacting in the platform, right? So if a shopper is shopping with a retailer, we have to take consents that if we want to use their data for promotional activities, marketing activities, all these are there. One part is taking the consents. And once again, since by the virtue that we work with all the leading banks, we were also we had to adhere to RBI guidelines. So as part of that, we also are very keen on where we store them, and there is a proper audit management of that storage, including business continuity, disaster recovery processes. Every aspect of it is also taken care of, so that I can pull that information when required as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. So we've almost 3 to 4 minutes left now, to conclude this session. So I just want to capture one or two more, important things here. So I would request you to be as precise as possible. But I think what I wish to understand at this point of time is that we've spoken about ZeroTrust privacy, right? So I would like to maybe ask you, and feel free to raise your hand to answer this, that, in terms of implementing ZeroTrust privacy, right? Any particular challenge that you are facing at this point of time that you want to highlight, right? So that people know that, it's what kind of challenges and especially Mr. Tushar being around, we can perhaps even look for some maybe answers if possible. If not today, then obviously. Mr. Suresh, you wanted to, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to cover a very quick point. Very quick point, right? So I think as all of us are sort of lean startups, and I think one of the biggest challenges with security is always the management of security as a process in a very lean manner. Processes should be extremely automated. Tools should be automated, which can run vulnerability assess VAPTs on your software and give you the vulnerability loopholes to fix, right? So definitely depending a lot on advanced technologies. I mean, we work with some partners who provide a lot of automated solutions, but then certainly would be happy to hear from Tushar on advancement in technology on that, because processes got to be automated, lean, very fast, right, on this.
Sure. Mr. Abhinav, anything you would like to add here?
Couple of things. On the last point, I think both Dipesh and Suresh covered a lot to do with consent. I just wanted to point one more thing. I think consent, at least, I would also like to share my views that consent is also about UI and UX. I think we are all taking that proverbial yes from the customer to give their consent. But I don't know how many times do we really understand, as a user or a customer, how many times are we forced to put that yes? And the trail is maintained, and so does Echo. Right? We contain the trail. But how important is to make sure that I understand what I do at the time that I do it. So I think we should also look at consent from a UI UX perspective, and I think there are a lot of fantastic examples out there, and I think I would just want to point out that. And to the other thing that this Suresh just mentioned, one of the mantras that we follow at Echo is people less, paperless, which is really good digital. And what we've realized is that while we are talking about data protection is a topic of discussion, I think the only way to solve it is to go more digital. If you go more manual and if you go more people to stay away from data generation, I think it creates even more problems. I think the way to do it is to go deeper into it to solve it. So it's a weird chicken and egg problem that in order to solve it, you have to go deeper into it. And so one of the mantras at Echo is people less, paperless, go digital, go automated as much as possible. Because as soon as you generate an Excel sheet which has data in it and allow somebody to download that Excel sheet from your software, from any part of your software or your database, I think, digital rights, management of access and many other things, goes very, very difficult. At least we face a lot of those challenges that, as soon as the data is in an Excel sheet, all your policies on one side and the poor Excel sheet on the other side, right? So just go. So at least you've got to go more digital to solve this. Sorry, it took a little bit longer, but yeah.
No. Fantastic. Thank you so much. In the interest of time, I'll straight come to you, Mr. Tushar.
Abhinav, at LinkedIn Club.
Yeah, Mr. Dipesh, very quick point you want to add?
Can't hear. I'm unable to hear Dipesh.
Yeah. Dipesh, I was not able to hear you.
I think you're mute, Dipesh.
Yeah. So there seems to be some network issue. Yeah, you are audible now. Yeah. No,
I was just telling Abhinav that at LinkedIn Club we tell our colleagues that Excel is drug to corporate addicts.
Hello. So if I can get a minute, Mr. Daya.
Yeah, Mr. Sridhar, very quick point you can make here.
Yeah,
definitely.
Very quick 2 points. One is, on the consent side, I think one thing that we also all, I think, need to understand. I think I agree with some of the panelists who said that, we need to make sure they understand it, right? And to make them understand, we have to talk about it in their language, right? And so, given India's demographic, I think we have to look at all the different languages that we operate in and kind of customize the messaging and the communication to that, right? And that becomes very important in the Indian context. And second thing is, I think in terms of, what Abhinav said about people less, paperless, I think that is a very good mantra. It's something that we've also been following because we've been digital first. But also to the point that, there are cases where we do need people to get involved, but our systems ensure that we don't get anything out in Excel sheets. Right? Whatever is available only through a system and controlled and monitored. Right? In this context, I think the only thing that I think is more important at this point, over and above giving all the access, is analytics around what has been accessed at what point in time. Is it regular pattern of access or irregular patterns of access, and so on, and then figure out what we need to do about it, right? So building that kind of analytics and a threat detection system on top of that is, I think, going to be a very key challenge.
Mr. Tushar, if I may come to you, and you having heard all the speakers talk about the journey, zero trust, challenges in the journey. What is it that organization like yours how do you give that trust to the the customer, saying that we are doing something and we are with you, don't worry on this, and I mean, in terms of way forward in adopting the zero trust privacy kind of a scenario in the enterprise, right? So some thoughts on that, if you can share, please.
Sure. So before I come to that, I think some great comments. I think around consent management, right? How do we simplify that? Because I think it's become more of a typically when we install something like a license agreement, we just scroll down and then say accept, right? So I think it needs to be more simplified. I totally agree. And the second aspect I love is go digital. I think go paperless. And I think one of the on similar lines, going digital is also what it means is organizations are looking at balancing the user experience and security. Too much of security also, the user experience should not be hampered, right? And less security, obviously, customers will not be comfortable going on to and buying any products and services. So there has to be a balance to grow the business on digital channels. So one of the coolest technologies that we are seeing, as you mentioned, go paperless, is go passwordless, because passwords are getting compromised due to a phishing attack, due to a malware attack. Passwords are hard to remember, right? We keep on writing passwords on somewhere, right? So how do we go passwordless? So what organizations are doing is, in the app itself, they are allowing the customers to basically scan the QR code using their application, using their registered device. Once you scan the QR code, once you do the registration, then next time when you come to that application, you basically just take your mobile, you scan it, and then boom, you're inside. So there is no password that I'm putting in. It just goes in. But behind the scenes, I'm checking whether is this coming from a registered device? Is it coming from a proper location? All of those aspects I'm checking, right? And then, of course, if I feel that if the device from which is coming is risky, then maybe I use some sort of a controls like two-factor authentication or biometrics and all of that, right? So I think it's important, right? When and we are moving towards that, going digital, right? And it's important to also balance while we are going towards digital. It's also important to balance that experience with security. So that was one aspect. The second aspect is coming back to the data protection aspect of it, the data protection, privacy aspect of it. I think if you look at data, right, your data can be your personal data, your demographic data, your financial data, and everybody is behind that data, right? So when I talk about identity, right, your employees are accessing the data, contractors, partners, your customers, right? For that matter, even bots or fraudsters, right? And in a digital world, it is very difficult to know who that person is, because most of the times you will rely on username, password, and OTP, but that can be compromised. So it is important to look at all the aspects, right? It is important to look at the username, password, the second factor, the location, and all of that, and then take a call whether to allow that customer to log in. So identity becomes a very important aspect. The second is the device. The device from which I'm trying to log in, right? No matter, you have some controls inside the organization from encryption perspective, firewalls, and all of that. But the moment, let's say, I'm trying to access something from my mobile, which is unmanaged, right? I may have unintentionally downloaded something on my device, which could be potentially a malware, which could be taking access of my registered device and trying to do a transaction. The organization may check, oh, he's coming from a registered device, username, password is correct, all looks good. But there could be a remote access which could be happening from a registered device, by which the fraud can be bypassed. So it's important to look at from which device you're coming, and device can be any device. It can be IoT, OT, any device through which the data is accessed. That's the second aspect. The third aspect is, of course, the environment. I think one of you did mention, when I say environment, it's the network. And network is huge, right? When we talk about network, it could be your network firewalls, IDS, IPS, your perimeter level security, all of that, right? It could be that I'm traveling, right? I'm connected to some free Wi-Fi. Now that free Wi-Fi is not configured on secure networks, which means that my access, what I'm doing, there can be potentially man-in-the-middle attack. So it's important to look at the network from which you're coming. It could be internal network, it could be external network. And last but not the least, the workloads, the applications, right? The applications, as in the applications which are hosted on-premise, which are hosted cloud, mobile applications, all of that, which are trying to access your data. So while you need to look at it holistically from all these aspects, identity, device, workloads, and your network, right? And then analyze the overall risk, and then basically allow that access. Now, because you cannot rely on one factor, because each of them can be compromised. So that's the principle that IBM is suggesting to the customers. And I also would like to share, while I'm talking to a lot of customers on ZeroTrust, one of the confusions or one of the consistent feedbacks that customers are giving is every vendor is coming with their own ZeroTrust strategy, right? So we are confused. What do we do? How do we start that journey, right? So what we do as IBM is, because IBM is like a one-stop shop for overall security, we have our products, we also have our services. So when we say services, it's a neutral view that they bring in. So it's not so today you would have invested something in network security, you would have invested something on identity, right? So our approach is, how do we complement the existing investments that you have made, not to replace that. It has to complement your existing investments. At the same time, it has to leverage your full investment, right? For example, you have identity security. Are you really leveraging all of that? That's one. The second is, what are the gaps? What are the other areas where you do not have any security control? So we look at it holistically and follow the framework laid down by the analysts, the third-party analysts like Forrester, Gartner. There is a NIST framework. So we have to align our strategy as per that. And most importantly, overall security strategy has to align with business. So we have to align our overall strategy with the line of business, because ultimately that is going to get impacted. Your user experience, your customer experience is going to get impacted. So it's important to align our strategy to business. That's one thing that we do. Second is, we look at protecting all your digital assets, be it your identity, data, device, and then we also look at look at how do we manage the insider threats by having a SOC, which is a next gen SOC, which is continuously doing a monitoring of all your assets and giving you real time visibility into the threats. And then the last but not the least, what we are also seeing is, while organizations are invested in multiple siloed solutions, they want a single pane of glass through which they can see the risk in their organization, right? And then proactively take an action rather than waiting for some incident to happen and then do the investigation. So organizations are looking for that single pane of glass, which can basically integrate all of their existing investments and give them that 360 view of what they need to do proactively to prevent the fraud from happening. So that's the overall approach that we take in terms of helping our customers with the overall ZeroTrust strategy.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Tushar. I think with that, it has been really an interesting discussion today. I still remember we started our discussion with the concerns around data being generated and how do we keep that data in a structured format, or maybe store them effectively and efficiently, mine that, and then secure that data, right? So in my mind, I think this ZeroTrust is a long journey, and each one of us here as a speaker today, they are in different point in their journey. So it's very difficult to say that, okay, one solution will fit everything. Mr. Abhinav will have a different scenario than what Mr. Suresh would have, or Mr. Sridhar will have, or Dr. Deepak would have. So, I mean, it has to be seen in context to the organization and, the landscape in the, the organization. But again, it's seems to be an interesting journey. Thank you so much for your valuable time, all of you today. Thanks to you, Mr. Suresh, Mr. Abhinav, Mr. Sridhar, Dr. Deepak, Mr. Tushar, for this wonderful opportunity to interact, and Mr. Dipesh, for this wonderful opportunity to interact with you and really learn some key aspects around ZeroTrust. And I wish that all of you, as the custodian of the the data of consumer in your respective organization, make sure that we as a consumer have sound sleep and have absolutely zero worry about our data being compromised by any of your enterprise. So thank you so much for your time and your discussion and sharing experience with us. Thank you so much. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Good.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot. Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thanks
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Great day. Great day. Moving on to our next segment, we have our guest speaker, Mr. Archie Jackson. He is a senior director, head of IT and security in Incedo, an incisive and visionary senior technology professional with 20 plus years of insightful experience in IT infrastructure design, implementation, and operations with strong service management, leadership, and digital transformation skills. Archie will be speaking on session on evolving cybersecurity models and trends, dealing with today's biggest challenges. Welcome to the session, Mr. Archie.
Thanks, Daya sir. It's been really an honor to be introduced by you. Thanks for the warm introduction. Quickly jumping onto the agenda of my topic today, which is the evolution of different cybersecurity models and the current biggest challenges of today. A very interesting topic because that's the need of the hour at this moment, where decision makers, the cybersecurity professionals, all of them need to have a complete transformation in their thinking process, in their planning, in their execution, and everything. So, evolution of different models of cybersecurity at this moment. So, gone are the days where the simple protection has been at the endpoints, and the world around us has completely transformed. Very agile. We have SDLC, the complete software development life cycles in place. We have strongly moved into digitization and moving into the cloud, which is another step and enabler for the digitization and the transformation. So, to enable all of that, the cybersecurity trends has also evolved. And at this point in time, so we have moved from the threat attack vector. So, from the generation one of the attack vector, which was simple, basic antivirus attacks onto the endpoints, to the current generation fifth of attack, which comprises of advanced persistence threats, which may not be detected because they may not be carrying any signatures along, like 0 days or zero signatures. So the threats around are quite deceptive. For example, like if there's a program threat that is targeted for a particular respective destination, that may travel into the network as a legitimate program until it reaches the destination and then triggers the malware activity by the cyber criminals. So how would we be able to defend and even prevent from all these kind of threats? So for all the attacks, there is always a transformation into the way of protection of the cybersecurity models and the frameworks. So currently, SASE has been quite a buzzword around. However, if we go back to the fundamentals, if we don't get too deep into technicalities, the processes, and also primarily people, process, and technology. So every step, every module around people, processes, and technology have transformed. So from people's perspective, let's start from a very fundamental aspect of people. Cybersecurity 10 was people around skill set was easy to find because the level of technicality, the level of complexity, the level of deep wisdom and knowledge, that wasn't much of a ingredient because that was fairly simple around basic fundamental around the audit, compliance, and assurance. So that was all revolving around it. At this point in time, the security skill set is one of the most deficit skill sets across the globe. So if you're looking at finding the right skill set, it's really tough to find. And that that kind of people demand is spiking up, I would say exponentially, because the requirement of right skill set, right people is again going high. However, the skill set, development around the skill set, the mindset is still at a shorter pace. And those few who are highly skilled and they plug and play kind of a knowledge capabilities, those are into high demand and they are being, they usually juggle between different organizations to organizations. So that's primarily the people's aspect. From processes aspect, processes again, things have been quite working in silos from security aspect. Security was more of a external division of an organization which used to intervene into a project. Maybe when there's a project, it would be something as a kind of an assessment, an assurance, and a review toward a particular point of a project timeline. At this point in time, I mean, the current age, the transformation from processes is security embeds by design. And by design, I mean not only integrating security in a project at different branches and different agile, I would say, benchmarks. Instead of those, the security embed by design is more coupled into the processes. Let's say if you're developing an application, it's not from a project standpoint, it would get into a respective stage of an application where security steps in. Instead, the moment the design, the blueprint of an application goes into the architecture, it completely goes in parallel. So that's around processes and design. From technological aspect, as I mentioned, we are in the generation 5th of attack vectors. So generation 5th of attack vectors are defended and protected by the current edge technologies, which are more aligned into threat intelligence, more aligned into AI. And why AI is quite important ingredient of cybersecurity technology at the moment is because the kind of attack vectors that we experience. The breaches, for example, very recently, Pegasus has been quite a buzzword. So it's something which is you can't stop. There's no user intervention or action required. It simply infects the device. On the other hand, the attack vectors goes into more programmed manner, more I would say intelligent manner, instead of simply running into different applications, coming through a phishing attack. It's more programmed. Those are well thought execution of attacks, more towards, I mean, it can even lead to cyber warfare, as we can see at this point in time with the kind of attack vectors or attacks happening onto the OEMs, primarily into the supply chains. Earlier, it used to be enterprises, the organizations being targeted, which would be, let's say, healthcare was targeted during the WannaCry outbreak, the ransomware outbreak. At this point in time, you find a lot of breaches happening on the supply chain, which is the tool sets, the applications which are fundamental ingredient or fundamental blocks of core infrastructure. And the moment those supply chain are attacked, the entire the spectrum expands because it goes into a wide level of exposure of not only limited to the organization. For example, solar wind. If we talk about solar wind, that's a product which is used for infrastructure monitoring, which was used by 425 Fortune 500 organizations. That means only 75 of the Fortune 500 organizations were not using SolarWinds. And what are these Fortune 500 organizations? These are Amazons, Googles, and everything. I mean, all the premium organizations, the top-notch organizations. Somewhere we are linked to these organizations, to cloud services or any other different, Verizon and all the different ISPs, all fall into these categories under the organization that have been using SolarWind. And now with that particular single breach or single vulnerability exploitation, the cyber criminals have exposure onto the data, the information across the organizations. So the platform as well as the exposure has expanded. So to not only detect but to prevent as well, the tool sets, the technologies needs to be highly digitized and state of art, which would be widely, strongly coupled between different aspects. Not only, for example, I may secure my endpoints very well, but I may not be able to secure my cloud services to that particular extent. I may be having DLP at the endpoints, but I may be missing out DLP at the network or the cloud level. So, or SaaS level or platform as a services level. So these kind of architectures, the design and everything needs to be very well thought of. And the technologies at this moment are again rapidly going in pace to prevent with the help of threat intelligence. The threat intelligence is something which, in the simplest way to understand this, threat intelligence goes beyond the boundaries of the information about the threat vectors or the attack vectors. It extracts information from various different sources compared to the legacy traditional malware detection, which goes through a DAT file or basic updates of a reference. So threat intelligence goes through a wider spectrum. So plus coupling with user behavioral analysis, analytics again plays a very important role into technology in cyberspace nowadays, because it analyzes along with AI. It will be able to identify the user behavior. For example, I may be spending a couple of hours on my work laptop, and suddenly my usage changes or my way of working changes. I suddenly start sending thousands of emails to the external sources. So all those behaviors changes, which detects some anomalies, some unusual behaviors, and then it creates alerts. There are tool sets applications which get coupled, blended into the design of an application, which triggers internal assessment of vulnerabilities of those applications. So these things, these kind of technologies evolutions haven't been there earlier because the attack vectors haven't evolved over the period. At this point in time, keeping a pace of those attack vectors, the technology trends, and all the way the cyberspace is evolving. So from the defense mechanism, from the prevent mechanism, and all of those are rapidly evolving. So this transformation from people process technology has gone into a completely different paradigm. And I see over the period as we move into the next generation of attack vectors, which would be generation 6 of attacks, things would change, drastically. And then if I see, for example, from a decision maker's perspective, from people who are into security space, the security professionals, one of the important advice, my experience, or I would say some of the best practices that I've known is it's not necessary. First, very fundamental aspect is it's not necessary to protect everything. It's very, it's very near to impossible to protect and safeguard every data. So first, the right classification of what exactly an organization needs to prevent data from exposure or from any threats is to be classified and identified. So those fundamental, the processes, again, get blending into the processes. So that is something as a fundamental identification of what needs to be protected. Now, once we identify what needs to be protected, when and how follows. And by when and how, I mean, it's, again, as a best practice, it's I can have best of all breeds. I can have best of, let's say, the web gateways. I may have the best of endpoint solutions. I may have the best of threat intelligence. I may have best of perimeter securities. I can have best of all. But on the other hand, as I say, as I earlier mentioned, security starts at the inception of every project. So the moment the security professionals, the security decision makers start working with, let's say, CIOs or CDOs, delivery officers, because the decision and the exposure of the application earlier was with IT. Now that exposure and the decision about which application the business wants to function is residing with the business. You might, you can resonate with this thought process because one of the days when we have been, from IT's perspective, organizations, we have been proposing applications tool set to the business that these are the right applications. Now, business comes with demand, the request, and requirements that these are the applications they may need to process and function in their business environment. So again, applications, all those decisions go into the business's hand. Now, since we are now expanding the decision making, the collaboration needs to happen. So embedding security at the right point is very essential. Now, as the security people, as the security decision makers take a decision, the very important aspect is the performance. We cannot lock all the doors and make the passage with a lot of hurdles. If there are like 5 different doors to enter a premises, if you lock each and every door, making it more secure, the time you spend to unlock and trespass that particular passage is the performance, as an analogy. Now, if exactly making this or referring this analogy into the business aspect, so if I deploy multiple, let's say, agents or let's say controllers or tool sets and applications into my endpoints or my environment, would I be able to analyze the reports, the right decision making? No, it would be very difficult because you'll be getting extract information from multiple sources. On the other hand, would you be able to give the optimal performance to the business? Would the endpoints, with servers, with the cloud and everything, would it perform to their optimal performance level? No, because you have already created a lot of hops of scanning and validation with different tool sets. So again, that comes as a challenge. So security in itself, so I can make an environment highly secure by putting a lot of controls, a lot of blocks. But I need to equally think as a decision maker how to make the business more agile, more resilient, and more reliable and scalable. For such decisions, it's very important to take a very thoughtful call of identification of the right tool sets which cross all parameters or all different environments. I may orchestrate, blend tool sets, identify, take a decision of right one or maximum 2 different tool sets. You may even not need two of those. From, let's say, from firewalls, from endpoint, from cloud, from all different aspects, from threat intelligence, from SOC, from email security, from mobile security. How it would be if you have one single product going from left to right or A to Z. You'll be having a very clear visual. You'll be having less impact onto the performance because it will be one single agent, one single dashboard, one single product taking care of the end-to-end security from all aspects. And you can scale. You can scale and descale based on your requirements and evolution of your organization. So that helps. So orchestrated security is something very important at this point in time where the decision makers should look out for. That's my personal opinion, and that's what I've been experiencing as the best practice. Instead of moving on to multiple different vendors, it's very important to have one single vendor that could help secure the entire platform or your entire end-to-end services from hardware, from network, from cloud, from endpoints and everything. And there are products. There are so many products which would help from applications perspective, from endpoint perspective. So, in summary, as I conclude, as I go down, it's the evolution has been transformation, and it will continue to evolve from the legacy days of generation one of attack vectors, the simplicity around attacks. It has gone very complex, and it's not going down in the near future. It's going to evolve. The kind of another thing, I was going through one of the webinars, going through one of the sessions where phishing or a simple phishing has evolved in a very transformational way. So we get a lot of phishing emails, which may be spam, which may be spear phishing, which may impersonate as something which I may get through social engineering. I may click links and invite malware to my particular system and things like that, or share my credentials accidentally because of those phishing. What if an email comes followed by a phone call of somebody known with a deep fake modulated voice? And these are known as business email compromisation. So again, BECs have also transformed. So it is something as a transformation we are seeing in every space, even in phishing, in business email compromise aspect or particular space as well. So not only making the environment, the situation more deceptive. You're not getting an email which may be misleading, which may be as a matter of urgency. Let's say you get a phone call from the CFO, or sorry, if you get an email from a CFO that transfer XYZ amount into this account. And immediately, the moment you receive the email, you receive a phone call and the voice sounds exactly as CFO's and asks you to transfer the amount and action upon the respective email. It's very, very transformational and more deceptive, and that people may act to it. But the deep fake is quite common nowadays. So these things again are making, again with the help of AI and then all these NLPs in space, as the technology has grown and as the technologies are being evolving, it's going into good as well. And as we have seen, everything has good and bad side of it. So it's again, the transformation of technology is also bringing in a lot of more deception into cyberspace. So to prevent, first of all, to detect and prevent, there are transformations that are happening in the technology space as well. So all of those needs to be very well thought about. All of that needs to be very well coupled. And as a decision maker, we need to take very thoughtful decisions around. So few key takeaways is, or in fact, out of my talk around these aspects is, try us as a decision maker, we must look at orchestrating our solutions, making things more simplified and more flexible and reliable for the business, orchestration of our solution. Second is, it's not necessary that you protect everything. You must protect only what is more legitimate for the organization, what's more important, instead of creating or thinking in a more I would say chaotic manner where things from lot of times people think around protecting everything, which is not the right approach of solving a secure environment solution. Third is, look out for opportunities where we can scale up the skill sets of our existing staff members or the skill set from outside, some sources through various different learning paths, because that's something which would lead to a lot of challenges in the coming future, because we would need strong, I would say, people, the employees who have right awareness, and also the administrators, the security professionals who have the right mindset. And I see into colleges, the professionals, the early professionals, or the professionals who have spent like 5-6 years or 10 years in the security space, they have evolved. However, the people is very less. So the demand is high, people are less. That needs to be somewhere we need to work upon balancing that with the help of more knowledge sharing, more learning, adopting more technology around the learning space. So with that, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts and some opinions around the best practices in this particular space. Wish you all good luck and happy to answer any questions offline, online, and looking forward for future conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Archie. Thank you for articulately joining the dots of current cybersecurity trends. Thank you so much once again. Let me summarize. The internet devoid of comprehensive security management is a tantamount to become inter-threat. Apply open, collaborative innovation, system thinking, and zero-trust security models to design ecosystems that generate and capture value in the value chains. The 5 efficient cyber defenders are anticipation, education, detection, reaction, and resilience. Do remember, cybersecurity is much more than just an IT topic. I would like to express my gratitude on behalf of SMEVenture to all esteemed delegates of the summit for their presence and contribution. I extend my gratitude to Mr. Bob Kalka for taking out time from his busy schedule to grace the event, to Mr. Archie Jackson for joining in as a guest speaker, to all the esteemed panelists for sharing their valuable insights on the subject. Thank you, Mr. Tushar, for presenting IBM's perspective. Thank you, IBM, for powering this event. Great. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. Thanks again for joining us today. See you soon. See you again. Thank you so much.